And welcome to Take Time. I'm your host, Patrick Marlette, and welcome back to our Part 2 review of the Ginault Ocean-Rover. Now, gang, if this is your first time visiting the channel, this is a two-part review. That means there is a Part 1 video. In that video, there's an unboxing and first impression, and I take any questions, comments, or concerns in that video and answer them in our Part 2 here. However, this time around, I had a ton of questions for the brand Ginault, and I sent them over John McMurdy's way. He has been my correspondent in regards to the Ocean-Rover, and he's also the individual who sent this watch my way. And just so you guys know, if you haven't watched our Part 1 video, in that I discussed how this watch was a gift to the channel, so you can take any of my opinions with a grain of salt, but I do want to have some of my answers resolved here on the channel, so I'm going to let you guys know what John told me while addressing some of the questions I had for him. Now, to simplify the range of questions I asked, I actually compiled 7 different questions for the team over at Ginault. There were 3 main ones I wanted to discuss here. What is the direct inspiration for the Ginault Ocean-Rover? What does hand-built in America mean on the dial? As some of you may remember, the earlier versions of this watch said Made in USA on the case back. That was an honest mistake on the company's part, and they've obviously changed that sense, but what does hand-built in America mean? Also, what are some of the features in this watch that relate to the Submariner line? So Charles, the founder of Ginault, set out to create a watch that rivaled the build quality of a Rolex, but without the luxury price tag. And this goal was met with their first release, which was the 181070GSLID model, that perfectly resembled a classic 5-digit Submariner case. Now, this isn't that model, but I will throw a picture up on the screen for you guys to see that now. And to them, it was Rolex's most iconic model to date. Now, during the recreation, vintage loom and sword hands, such as those featured on the Millsub, were used, as Ginault believed this was the Homage that best represented that era of Submariner. However, despite the lack of a date window, I'm told that the Ocean-Rover series as a whole is modeled after the Rolex 16610, much like their 180165 Ocean-Rover, which is more in comparison with that model. But for all intents and purposes, the case and dial configuration of these watches is supposed to look similar to a 16610. So you have the 4 lines of text at the bottom, their logo at the top, as well as the name of the brand, and another line of text under that. In regards to the hand-built in America text at the bottom there, if you're wondering how many parts are domestically sourced, I am told that the mid-case, case back, bezel assembly, crown, and bezel insert are all manufactured stateside. The dials and bracelets of these watches are outsourced. And just so you know, each mid-case comes off a CNC machine and then is hand-finished and polished, so you can come to expect each case to slightly vary from the next. Unlike most all homages, the construction of the case and the way it's polished follows exactly how the Submariner was constructed. Now, in regards to being hand-built in America, what does that mean for the movement inside of the Ocean-Rover series? Now, the caliber 7275 is a clone of an ETA 2824. Make no mistake on that. It operates the exact same way as that movement. I am told that most of the parts were made stateside, but from what I understand, they lack the proper tools and some machines to produce some of those components, those being the hairsprings, mainspring, synthetic sapphire crystals, and the shock absorbers that would go into the movement. In concerns to the feature set of this watch, the head of the watch and the bracelet have separate identities. The head is modeled after the previous gen Submariner, but the bracelet is modeled after the modern Submariner. So you can expect the luxury of a glide lock clasp, which I found out and is very pleasant to use. And the crown action on this is a true trip lock crown, so it's very much like your previous gen Submariner. It works the exact same way. Now, aside from some of the colorway options provided, the date applications without a cyclops, the uncommon sword hands used here, and obviously the bracelet, this is as close as you can get to a 5-digit Submariner Homage that is available on the market. That much is definitely true. Now, with all of my own personal inquiries for the brand out of the way, the only question I really received from you guys over here on YouTube and over on Instagram was, how was the experience? And more importantly, was the experience worth the cost of admission? Now, I'm very excited to talk about that because what they tried to reproduce here was a one-to-one experience to wearing a Rolex Submariner. Now, I've only worn Black Bays and Subs and Sea Dwellers offhandedly. I've never owned one, so I can't rightly say what that experience is like day to day. I can speak on this watch though, and I have a lot of good things to say. However, with all of my reviews here on the channel, I like to start with the bad and then move on to the good before giving my final verdict on a review item. Now, let me preface this by stating I'm not a fan of the Rolex Submariner. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but it has 2 rectangles and a triangle going for it, or at best, 3 rectangles and a triangle with 8 circles. And that's exciting, I guess, for some, but it's really never been that interesting a watch for me. However, getting to own this and looking at it every day, I get to understand why people enjoy the Submariner. This design goes with pretty much anything. It really does. Whether I'm dressing casually, I'm dressing up, it looks good. And that's why it's bridged the gap from being a luxury sports watch to being just a luxury item that you can wear on any occasion. And it makes sense why this design is used in so many different wardrobes. It is just a good looking watch and a very classic design. Now, whether you like the watch or not, much like myself, you have to appreciate how well this design works on a day-to-day basis. Now, with my personal feelings of the Rolex Submariner perfectly clear, let's talk about that first bad note on the Ginault. That being the use of a red second hand. I'm not gonna lie, I think it cheapens the look a whole lot. You know, this is an expensive watch, but something about that cherry red lollipop seconds hand is just not appealing, especially in this color combination. Their, stock imagery, the imagery used on their website made it look a lot better, but in person, it's too much of a candy red, and it kind of looks childish, I'm not gonna lie. I don't like it with this dial configuration. Maybe it looks better with the all black, but here, it just doesn't look as good as it did in picture. I wish there was an alternative option with just a stainless steel hand instead. I think that would look better. Although I will say I like the complexity of the hand. I like how the central area is simply stainless steel and the balance and the needle is red. However, again, I'm not a fan of that tone of red. Another minor bad note is with the back play on the bezel action. It does have a little bit of backspin or back play, and for this price range, you'd expect that to be eliminated. I've had watches of similar quality and better quality in the same price range in regards to the bezel action. It usually just dead stops where it should be. It's very deliberate, and you kind of want that for a watch in this price range. However, I will say that I was told by individuals that own 5-digit Submariners that their Rolex watches do have a little bit of backplay. So if I were to grade this strictly as a homage on its accuracy to its source inspiration, then the backplay is authentic. So I guess it's not that big of a bad note. Again, that's just what some people told me that apparently own the original version of this watch, the Rolex Submariner. So if you expect backplay, then you should see it here as well. Now, you remember how I stated that all of these cases are hand finished and polished? Well, I have evidence of that here. You'll see that my case model on the lugs, there is a very slight beveled edge on the sides of these lugs. And you'll notice that these two ends are quite even with each other. But if I were to turn it over and look at these lugs, this one's sharp, matches the other two. However, this one opens up at the bottom. It is a wider bevel than the 3 other lugs. And that's something I noticed immediately. I'm sort of a stickler for details in my watches. Having owned so many fine Seikos in the past, I noticed case details, and this is one that caught my attention quite immediately. You'll notice that this bevel is slightly wider than the others, and that is, again, like they said, part of the tolerances of having these hand finished and polished. So there is a charm to that. However, it is a bad note because it doesn't match the other lugs. So if that detail, that level of detailing or finishing is going to bother you, we'll note that, at least with my example, one of the lugs was off. Another bad note for me, and this is sort of a major one, is the finish of the enamel dial. It's a beautiful high gloss enamel dial. However, it has a tendency of reflecting everything in the room. But not only that, the indices on the dial. For some reason, when light is picked up on those hour markers, it will bounce off the glass and then bounce off the enamel of the dial, creating mirror images of those markers on the dial face. And it's actually hard to pick up here, but when you're going to read the time, it is quite distracting. So legibility is cut due to that. It would be really nice if there was a matte finish option for the dial. I feel like that would definitely improve legibility of this watch, as reading the time should be first and foremost the larger concern, not having something that just looks pretty. And the enamel does a great job of making this watch look pretty. It definitely fits a more dress diver category that way. It would have been nice to have the legibility of a matte dial option as well. Now, other than all of that, I have a lot of great things to say about this watch. Things that are honestly making me change my opinion of the Rolex Submariner. Again, I've never been excited about that watch. But something about this Ginault is turning me into at least a little bit more of a Rolex fan. As you'd expect, the proportions of this watch are perfect. I would venture to say that this would wear well on anyone's wrist. I think it looks fantastic on mine. The movement has been astounding at keeping accurate time, well within the accuracy sheet I received on receiving this watch, and you can watch part 1 to look over those numbers. I actually threw them up on the screen. This has been very accurate at keeping time. And another thing I like about the finishing here, and I don't know if this is on every model, but at least with mine, the rose or lotus, whatever you want to call it, the Ginault logo perfectly lines up on the side of the case. Now, I usually don't care whether or not this does do that, but it's really pleasant to see. So I'm really happy with the finishing overall of this case, the wearability, just day-to-day use. This has been an extremely pleasant watch on the wrist, as I imagine its inspiration is as well, the Rolex Submariner. The level of polishing on not only the case, but the bracelet and the clasp are top-notch. Some of the best I've ever seen from any brand, let alone a micro brand. So the fact that you can get this level of detailing done on a watch that is sub $2,000 is amazing. And I compared this detailing with my Grand Seiko. I have to say they're pretty much on par, which is a really impressive task because Seiko is known for their high polishing and detailing, and they did a really fantastic job at Ginault with the finishing, or at least the polishing of this case. And not only the polishing, but the brushwork as well. It really is, as other reviews have stated, a well-constructed case. I think their craftsmanship over at Ginault is top-notch, and it's interesting that they're bringing their skills and talents to the market making Homage watches. Obviously, a lot of other companies are on that bandwagon. Steinhardt's a major contender, as well as Squale with their 1545. And I'm happy to see that there's another brand making a very accurate representation of what a Rolex Submariner should be at a reasonable rate. I'm going to say 1.3 grand is pretty reasonable for the level of craftsmanship and the exactness of this model to its source material. I think it's a real fantastic option for someone who wanted a Rolex Submariner but didn't want to buy an actual Rolex Submariner. Now, another good note about this watch is the amazing bracelet. The clasp and bracelet are fantastic. They operate exactly the same as you'd expect a modern Rolex Submariner to operate, with that glide locking function down there. And it's just been fantastic for everyday use because it's really hot in New York right now, and I'm able to slide that bracelet to fit my wrist perfectly no matter what the situation in an instant. So that is a major convenience as a watch owner and someone who loves using bracelets. This is one of the better bracelets I've had the experience of using. Now, before I close out the review, I would love to provide you all with a wrist shot so you know what this watch might look like on your wrist. And here's what the Ginault Ocean-Rover is going to look like for all of your admirers on a 7¼ inch wrist. And when you go to admire it, it's going to look a little something like this. And as you can tell, the Ginault Ocean-Rover looks really fantastic on a 7¼ inch wrist. I'd venture to say anywhere from 6.5 up to 8 inches would get away just fine with this look, and the bracelet itself is phenomenal. I mean, there's not much else to say about that. It's really a 10 out of 10 so far as the construction is concerned. And day to day, this watch has been so pleasant to use because of how wearable it is and just how good it looks on the wrist. Now, aside from the goofy bits of text on the dial to fill out the design of its source material, the kinetic continuous, in other words, automatic, as well as submersible maritime. Also, hand-built in America, eating out those minute markers at the bottom is kind of a sore spot for me, but it is kind of nice to see on the dial. I don't know what it is about being an American and reading America on a product we own. It's just pleasant. All in all, very happy with the dial design and construction. Again, just like the case and the bracelet, top notch. This is truly the best way to get a one-to-one experience with a Rolex Submariner. However, it's not a Rolex Submariner. Now, you're reminded of that every time you look at the dial. Now, will this crush your desire to own a Rolex Submariner? No. As a matter of fact, despite all odds, this has only made me want to purchase an actual Rolex Submariner, as that's truly the joy of owning one. As I'm sure many of us feel with any luxury item, it's the sense of accomplishment you feel when acquiring something you worked hard for. Now, what Ginault does offer is the perfect example of watch craftsmanship. They've already succeeded at creating the best Submariner Homage, hands down. And now I want to see something new. I know it was their intended goal to create a homage for consumers that was worth owning and then create something new. John, Ginault, let me know as soon as that something new arrives. I'd love to see it. This has truly been an awesome experience, and I am so happy to have had the opportunity to wear this watch. Now, for those of you out there that were interested in picking up a previous generation Submariner and were worried about venturing out to get one because of the cost, or perhaps you're concerned about seeing a fake wind up at your door, this happens all the time. This is a really good route for you if you wanted to experience something similar in quality and you just liked the look of that watch. This is a good way to go. This is not a Rolex destroyer. As a matter of fact, I think this is the highest form of praise that I've seen on the market. It really is a great homage to that watch. Gang, if you found this video enlightening or in the least entertaining, feel free to hit that like button. It looks a little something like this. If you have friends, forums, or groups that were interested in picking up a Ginault Ocean-Rover or just want to hear someone else's opinion, feel free to share this video with them. This watch embodies the characteristics of the Submariner so well, just not the prestige or soul or movement. Aside from those things, it's a great experience. And if you're new to the channel, well then welcome. I do videos like this twice a week. These two-parters are a staple of the show, and if you enjoy them, you can expect to see them monthly, always with a new watch. Again, my name is Patrick Marlette, and thank you for the time.